I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:07 p.m. We'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The coordinator call the roll.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Rollins.
Here.
Mr. Scrivano.
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch. Here. Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Connor.
Here.
Mr. Escobedo.
Here.
With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize our two Jefferson High School media students, Jaden Boykins and Rod Waddell, who are here helping with the broadcast tonight. Let's give them a hand. Thank you for being here. We are now at the petitions and communications portions of our meeting where we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communications portions of our agenda. According to our board policy, 2.230, the public comments portion is limited to 30 minutes. Board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. We only have one speaker tonight, so I'll skip the instructions. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such open meetings. And I want to point out that we'll have a clock on the wall to help you with your timing for your 2 minutes. We thank you for your interest and your cooperation with our guidelines. And our speaker tonight is Nancy Godowski. And I'll need you to hit that little button to turn the mic on.
RPS is now in the second quarter of the school year and is still short over 40 paraprofessionals. RPS is now out of compliance due to special ed students not receiving their minutes as dictated by their IEPs. Pairs are doing double duty and many are working out of their job classifications. Also, more families of SPED students are choosing to keep their child in high school until age 22, which is allowed by law. However, we now have more freshmen enrolling each year and less students leaving at 18 years old. So now we're really short pairs. What is the problem that we cannot recruit enough paraprofessionals? Maybe the word is out that RPS pays very little and has little respect for paraprofessionals. Head Start paras start at $17 per hour. In RPS, you have to work for 30 years to collect the same amount because of the administrative elite are collecting their 49% pay raises on the backs of the paras, bus drivers, and food service professionals. So what are you going to do to correct this problem? Thank you.
Are there any board member comments at this time? Mr. Siegel.
Today is my son, Matt Siegel's 16th birthday. What, you might ask, does that have to do with the school district? And it's a good question. What it has to do with is, until he came around, I never would have thought I'd be excited by, it's the beginning of the bowling season. Rockford has actually a really surprising bowling program. All the 4 high schools have really competitive teams for both the boys and the girls. What makes this kind of exciting to me, and our relentlessly enthusiastic neighbors to the north and to the east will attest, the athletes don't have to have a particular skill. I'm sorry. This is why I don't talk very much.
Okay.
They don't have to have a really amazing athletic ability. They have to have certain athletic abilities, though. Concentration, it's consistency, some stamina. Yes, you really do need that in bowling. The tournaments are pretty exciting, and I know I wouldn't have thought this when before my son started bowling. But what makes it exciting is the athletes who bowl are keenly aware of all the other athletes at all the other schools and how they do, how they perform. And they really appreciate how the other bowlers are doing. And I think that's remarkable because they all have the same athletic position. It's not like in basketball or football where maybe quarterbacks size themselves up against other quarterbacks. They're all doing the same thing, but they all seem to have an extraordinary appreciation for what everyone's doing. And I think this largely stems from the fact that there is such a low barrier to getting into this particular sport. Anybody can do it. Everybody does it a little bit differently, but they all do it with the same goal. The sport's cool because it has an equity element in it called a handicap system. It has pretty fierce competition that can go just individually or can go teams. I would encourage anybody who would like to see really super competitive athletic events to go to one of the many really, really nice bowling venues in the area and check out a tournament. It's going to be surprisingly satisfying and thrilling to watch.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Mr. Rollins.
I'd just like to give kind of a shout out to a private organization in town, a not-for-profit called Rockford Promise, which exists to raise money for scholarships for RPS 205 students. It's been around for a while, but they just had their first ever, hopefully annual fundraiser this past Saturday night. And what I heard was that they raised $42,000 for scholarships for RPS 205 students to attend college at Rock Valley College or Rockford University. So, I know there were a lot of administrators there. I saw a lot of administrators there. There were a lot of community people there, a couple of politicians. It was pretty well attended, and I hope this is the beginning of a trend for an event that gets even bigger and raises even more money. And thank you to everybody who participated, and thank you to everybody who put it together. I know there were a lot of people who worked really hard on it, I know.
Great job. Any other board member comments? Not, we'll move on then to the consent portion of our agenda, including the following: meeting minutes of October 11, 2016, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, contracts under 10,000, construction bid pay request logs and travel, recurring bids, Title I funded iPad tech lease, the intervention development for special ed, the other consent items including the monthly investment report for September 2016, the financial results year-to-date through September 2016, and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Ms. McCulloch.
7A.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any others? If not, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the consent items not pulled.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
I'll now take a motion and a second to approve item 7A, the Title I funded iPad tech lease.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Discussion or question?
Oh, I just
Go ahead, Ms. McCulloch.
was reading through this. We talked about the Chromebooks and the iPads and the leasing program, and this is in addition to what we already approved, so it's rounding out to make sure our Title I student, can you just give, I wanted the full picture since we've now, excuse me, because we've done it in two pieces.
And there'll be a third piece coming, so we're glad to
That's
address
good
it.
to know, okay.
Richard and Margaret worked with me to ensure that we could do the supplement versus supplant federal rules and honor every requirement that we had under law. And so the first set of Chromebooks and iPads were that foundation level to make sure that every student in schools had some access to devices. Title I schools have other federal funds trying to overwhelm the effects of poverty, and online resources provide an excellent avenue for students through Compass Learning, Study Island, and many other programs. So these are Title I eligible and approvable items so that students have greater access to those online resources, as well as teachers can have students edit, peer edit, et cetera. So these principals, working with their faculty, wanted iPads, and then the third step is going to be a Chromebook lease coming through for other services for students.
So the first round of iPads and the Chromebooks was not Title I funded, though?
Correct.
Correct, and so these two will be. All righty, and that was a principal choice as to how they were spending their money. And we'll have schools that have one-to-one. I mean, I was told Thompson, for example, each student, there will be an iPad. Does that end up what we're looking at as a goal for all these schools that are using them for Title I or not?
So I'm going to turn to our CAO on the goal. I can do the specifics.
With Title I, we've asked schools to develop a plan with their school leadership teams to utilize their Title I funds in a variety of ways. Some buildings utilize the funds for supplemental resources. Some buildings choose to use the funds to lease, in this case, technology, as we've done in the past. In the past, we've used Title I funds to purchase technology. A lot of the technology we had in place in our district in the past has been Title I funded in terms of iPads and yogas and other computers. So in this case, right now, we've put a foundational level in place, and we've let schools and their leadership teams develop the plan using their Title I funds that are available to supplement over that foundation level. Do we see there being increased access to technology in schools down the road? Yes, we do. And that the goal has to be developed with a team collaboratively in the district, not coming from me alone. This is one way for school leadership teams to supplement what's foundationally in place to meet the needs of their students.
Any other, Mr. Rollins?
What in the world are you wearing?
Cleveland Indians.
This is an official jersey from when Cleveland was in the World Series in the 90s.
Okay.
The stuff from the Cubs were a little bit older and threadbare.
And do you feel safe wearing that?
I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the Title I funded iPad tech lease.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson? Yes. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on to closed session consent items, including the HR organizational report and addendum, and student discipline in which expelled or suspended students are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. Students GDM 4008-17 is expelled for the remainder of the first semester of this school year, the 16-17 school year. Student GDM 4009-17 is expelled for the remainder of the 2016-17 school year. And the following students were given EIAs, 30017, 3018, 3020, 3022, 3023, 3024, 3028, 3029, 3031, 3033, 3037, 3038, 3040, 3041, 3043, 3044, and 3048, and student 3050. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any items that board members would like to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none? No. Mr. Jackson?
10.
Okay, all items under number 10, okay, the two items there, okay. I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the item that's not pulled.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson? Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Take a motion and a second then to approve the items listed under 10, which were the two student expulsions.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Rollins. There is no discussion. Have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the disciplines listed under item 10.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson? Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 abstain.
Thank you. Our next item is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
As Board President Scrivano may anticipate, this is going to be an extremely brief superintendent's report due to some of the other activities that are scheduled for this evening. Go Cubs. But I would like to highlight some great things that are going on in the district. I want to reiterate what Mr. Rollins pointed out, what a wonderful event, the Rockford Promise fundraiser. It was really exciting to see such great community turnout. I also wanted to highlight the fact that we had an all-district marching band performing. I'm really proud of the work of Bonnie Sperling and the Fine Arts Department to get that initiative rolling. I know that occurred at a recent football game, and we had a conference championship, a co-championship to celebrate the Guilford Vikings volleyball team and a regional championship for the soccer team as well. So some exciting things going on in District 205 on the front porch with athletics and fine arts. And I also want to compliment the administrative team and the board. I thought we had an outstanding triannual retreat on Saturday. I think we're continuing to make progress on a lot of really important initiatives, and I think it's a testament to the dedication of our board that we had an outstanding turnout and a very strong conversation about how we can improve the district. So thank you all for your time and dedication. And with that, I will cede the floor back to the board.
I think East had a cross-country conference champion, right? Is that right? Individual champion?
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Yeah. We'll move on then to committee reports. Mrs. McCulloch, Education Committee.
Education Committee met in this room last week, October 18th. We had 3 items on our agenda. One was an overview of the bilingual program, whose goal is to bring language learners to proficiency in English. Currently, we have 3,278 students in 33 schools. There's a multitude of programs that we support, and what you usually hear is all the alphabet soup. The 4 large areas, just for anybody who's interested, there's one called TBE, which provides instruction in English and in the native language. TPI provides content instruction in English to students from a variety of nationalities. ESL, and I'm trying to remember what everything means. So ESL is English as a second language. TBI is Transitional Bilingual Education. Is it, somebody help me out if I've got that right? TBE? Yeah. And I said TPI. Transitional Program of Instruction. It's real interesting because in our agenda and all the words, oh, okay, you're there. And then ESL, English as a Second Language. That's to students to acquire proficiency in English only. And the TBE Developmental, Transitional Bilingual Education Developmental, is for content instruction in both native language and English for students to acquire proficiency in both. So basically, we have a bilingual program in the district that serves a community of students who meet, basically, is it a federal or state level, guys? It's federal level that you have to have 20 students per school to have a separate classroom. And so we only have that we primarily have that with our Latino population, but we do have, we were told, one school with enough Arabic-speaking students to actually have additional services. The goal, a future goal, I should say, of the current director of this program is that we have dual language program throughout the district. Currently, we have one at Barber, where students are taught equally in Spanish and English, and what they'd like to see is that done on a much larger scale. So it was audited last year, by the way, by ISBE, and they're working to comply with that audit by hiring additional teachers and some other work that the department is doing. Our second item was SMART, and we had a conversation about that at the board meeting on Saturday, so I won't repeat that. The third item that we spoke of is actually on your agenda tonight, and it is Early Literacy Reading Horizons, and it's a pilot program. And I'm just going to take a moment here during Ed Committee report so that we can kind of head off some conversation, for example, about the timing of our vote on this, because it is double asterisk. So this was initially on our previous agenda, and I had asked to have it pulled, and we had agreed to bring it to Education Committee so that we could have a thorough, deep conversation about the pilot program. In part, this gives us a starting point for a conversation about what we want our pilot programs to look like district-wide going forward. And so it was very helpful to think about what the considerations the board might have, and that conversation will continue at instructional council and then come back to the board, and we'll be able to weigh in on that. But this pilot program was initially intended to start at the start of the school year. There were some questions and concerns that came up about the reading materials, and so they took a step back, and they meaning the committee, and this committee is a curriculum leadership team that has worked really hard to look at what the district has and what we might want going forward, and actually to make this recommendation at the Reading Horizons as a pilot program. And initially it was brought to us with 5 schools, and there were some questions and concerns about the schools that were chosen. There was a lot of conversation that needed to be had. So what I'm asking you is to consider the double asterisks on it tonight, because it would be to you for your second reading had we not pulled it at the last meeting. And it really kind of is the second reading because we had a thorough conversation at Education Committee. And I'll be happy to share anything else pertinent, to the issue when we get to that point and we have that conversation. I will tell you that the Ed Committee felt unanimously that it was, everything was covered, questions were answered, and the areas of concern were addressed. Our next meeting for Education Committee is November 15th in this room at 5:30 p.m. And it's my report.
Questions for Ms. McCulloch? If not, I'll have Mr. Rollins do the Finance Committee report.
Finance Committee has not met since the last board meeting. Our next meeting will be here in this room on Monday, November 7th at 5:30 p.m.
Mr. Connor, Operations Committee then.
Operations has not met. We'll meet on Tuesday, the 1st of November at 6:30 in this room.
Okay, we'll move on then to action items. The first action item tonight is the graduation ceremonies at Rock Valley College that Mr. Earl Dotson Jr. presented at our last meeting. Are there any, is there a motion and a second to approve the graduation ceremonies at Rock Valley College?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Now, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the graduation ceremonies at Rock Valley.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Rollins.
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano.
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next item is the item that Ms. McCulloch was talking about, the Reading Horizons. Is there a motion, a second, to suspend the rules for the board to consider this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Any questions or discussion? Not, I have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval to go into, or to suspend the rules for this item.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson? Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Now I'll take a motion and a second to approve the K-2 Early Literacy Resource Trial, Reading Horizons.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Ms. Jackson.
So, Board Member McCulloch, you spoke of, I guess, concerns that were addressed. Can you speak more about those concerns?
All the board members received
Is it that,
that letter that we
That letter,
received last
okay.
fall, right, that some of the reading
That-
materials might not reach what we would like to see in a diversity, that they were.
so culturally insensitive in that?
Right.
Okay.
And so instead of just speaking with other districts and their use of them, they actually went through book by book. And I see a lot of the teachers that were here at the Ed Committee have given up some time this evening to be here as well, so thank you for that. And I don't know if the rest of the board wants, how deep of a presentation they might want on this. It is a trial, and it's going to be in 7 schools, and before we vote on it district-wide, we will have some information. They talked about what metrics they want to bring back. Fortunately, this year, we're using a new testing procedure, MAP testing, which is going to help us to determine, since we're starting in November, and that was the time sensitivity, by the way, on not just the fact that we're starting partway through the year, but they've already got professional development ready to go if we approve this. We now have 7 schools. The 7 schools that we're going to be doing, I'm going to try to do this, is Beyer, Thompson, Marshall, Haskell, Lewis Lemon, and Conklin. So we tried to, Whitehead. So Whitehead has a bilingual population. Conklin has a lot of the ESL students that we spoke of. Haskell, year-round. We have a Southwest Side School in Lewis Lemon. We have we have Beyer, which is a little bit smaller pilot, but some of our lower socioeconomic. And Thompson, one of the reasons, we can go back to our iPad piece, one of the reasons Thompson is on the list is because they have already got one-to-one iPads for their students, and this does use technology. So there was that was part of the question, was the reasoning behind the choice of the schools.
So then, perhaps there's a team that's here tonight. So part of the concern, it looks like, that this is, where did it say, maybe it's culturally insensitive, glaring racial and gender stereotypes. And this is back in 2015. Has this book evolved? Like, one of the characters they say is Lazy Lucy, a young black child. Can you speak more? Have the characters in this book changed, or
Yes.
what?
Actually, what they've done is they've completely rewritten their entire, they're called Little Books. It's a supplemental library. So they're optional materials. They're not part of the core. And so all the titles that they had previously included are gone, and they have a new set. And so we asked for some advanced copies of those over the summer, and they sent us several sets. And what the teachers did is they sat down and they read every single Little Book, because we had been in discussion with the company, and they shared with us what they've done to rectify the situation, which includes a couple of key points. They created within their own company kind of a cultural sensitivity board to review their own materials, but they wanted to have a third party as well, and so they sent their materials to the California State Board of Education, who includes a party who reviews materials, but we thought that we wanted to lay our eyes on them as well, and so that resulted in our delay to take the time to go through each title.
And you probably covered this at Education Committee, but what are legacy costs with this? So it looks like it's right under $100,000 to implement this pilot, correct, at the school?
Yes.
Okay.
So the cost on an annual basis, as they're quoted from the company, is $11,500 per building. Part of that is an online Lexile measure, that's $1,500 of the cost, and the other part is kind of our subscription to the software. The software offers personalized learning paths. It also doesn't have a ceiling, so students can continue to be challenged beyond their grade level. And I say that's what's quoted from the company because as part of a district-wide rollout, we'd have to be really thoughtful about how we are spending those dollars and also recognize that we'll have fewer buildings in just a couple of years.
Okay.
Just for clarification, in case this is one component of our literacy program for this K through 2 population, and it's phonemic awareness. And so that's the focus of this. And the students will be doing it 30 minutes a day in their schools, and so they should be able to get through enough of the program to really give us some good information.
Yes.
Okay, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the Reading Horizons program.
Mr. Escobedo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
No.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 no.
Mr.
Yeah.
Scrivano, before you leave,
Sure.
one thing that was mentioned at Ed Committee, and this is just kind of an FYI for the board, is the reading program or the literacy program that they're working on with elementary school is kind of a precursor to our academy programs and even what we're doing in teaming in the middle school because they're, and would you like to tell us about that? Just because I thought that was nice to see that continuity across.
Sure. So what you've just voted on tonight is one component of a balanced literacy framework. And what we're working toward and have been working toward for the last 2 years is an integrated literacy approach, which takes social studies and science and integrates them into the literacy block. And we do that by looking for our multiple sets of standards and where they intersect so that we can really leverage some of those key intersections. And so we are teaching science and social studies concepts and content through literacy strategies. And what that does is it creates connections naturally for the student. As we operate in our everyday worlds, we don't operate just in science for 10 minutes and then we switch and then we look more at a humanities approach and then we switch and then we become a critical reader. We're integrating all the time. And so the idea is that we're helping students make those connections from an early age. As they roll up through upper elementary and then into middle school, we've just brought back the middle school team concept. And that allows a small group of teachers to become a small learning community. And so they're able to do that same thing. Let's sit around the table and look at where our standards overlap and where are the skills that we're trying to instill in our students, where do they overlap, and which ones have the most leverage. And if you follow that up then to high school, we have our small learning communities and the academy teams. And high school teachers are doing the same thing. I teach science, I teach social studies, I teach English, math. Let's pull all these together and let's look at them through the lens of the pathway or the academy that our high school students have chosen. And so we're getting this nice continuum from kindergarten through 12th grade. And I mentioned that we've been working on that for the last 2 years. We're being slow and steady and deliberate because there's a lot of learning that has to take place in order to really take those content areas and merge them together meaningfully. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here to help support.
Thanks.
Okay, we've already taken a vote on that. So we will move on to our next item, which is the Kids at the Core Agreement for Haskell Enrichment. Mrs. Alt, are you presenting this? Or okay, Heather. You're going to need to hit that button there. Okay. Thank you.
So through strategic planning for special programs, Haskell was asked to add an additional academic focus or investigate one to add in addition to their year-round program. And they're looking at STEM or in STEAM, and it was nice to hear Heidi's talk about looking ahead to college and career readiness, because that was one of the parameters that Haskell was considering with their strategic planning team, what could feed into potentially laying the groundwork for future college and career readiness and high school academies. So this year is a trial year for Haskell, looking at STEM and STEAM. They have enrichment days. I don't know if everyone is familiar with their year-round calendar. They have 5 extra days where they, part of their one-year trial for looking at STEM or STEAM was to add activities, try out pieces of curriculum to ensure that this would be what they would propose as their additional academic focus. Enrichment days were specifically some of the days targeted. So those are days that are optional, but about 90% of the students participate. And the teachers, this is an attractive program for the teachers because it's related to the theme they're looking at for a focus, and it also provides professional development as well as extension activities after they're done that will hopefully help them solidify their choice. So,
Questions, comments? Okay.
Are the enrichment days consecutive, or are they broken up over the calendar? How do those go?
this year, it varies by year. This year, there are 2 in November and 3 in December. And so in our special programs update to the Education Committee in February, we'll be able to kind of report out as that as the bigger picture. And then they'll have made their recommendation for focus with the goal of doing a 5-year plan in the spring once they've solidified.
And the cost is covered in your budget.
It's already built in. We
All right.
have trial programs, site visits, PD, for all of the special programs built into our budget for this year, looking ahead to building a bigger budget next year for things that are part of their strategic plans respectively.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Not, this will then come for a vote for the board on our November 8th board meeting. Thank you. Dr. Wolf, you're up next for grant acceptance.
Thank you. The first one is with the U.S. Tennis Association. It would allow us to recoup $10,000 for work already done on the Auburn tennis courts. We continue to have a great partnership with Todd Schmidt and his department trying to find additional resources to provide great learning environments for students.
Okay.
Do you want me to go to the second one?
I will.
Which is kind of the Indian score, too.
Yeah, that's right. It's early.
Sorry,
It's
zero
early.
jokes.
Okay.
The second grant acceptance is from Game Time Playground, which would provide $40,000 to equip a playground at Welsh Elementary School during the addition and work. They lost their playground. Todd's department would do the bulk of the installation and site preparation. This $40,000 grant would provide for 50% of the cost of the equipment, the playground equipment. And so we're asking you to allow us to accept those $40,000.
I don't know. Very good. Great job. Thank you. This will come up for our vote and approval at our November 8th meeting. Mrs. Cyrus, the NIU Special Ed Bilingual Endorsement.
So what I have before you tonight is a partnership that we are starting with NIU. It's a cohort for our bilingual teachers to become endorsed in special ed so that they will be, at the end of the cohort, they will be bilingual special ed teachers. We have 22 teachers in the cohort. The teachers sign a promissory note to work for the district for 3 years after the completion of the cohort. And that's about it. I don't know what else, if you have any questions.
Talk about the cost a little bit.
It's $150,000 in tuition. That's being paid for out of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Grant, so it's a grant for the district. It's the students pay their own textbook fees, and the student fees are waived by NIU. So, and that's over a 2-year period. And it's the total cost for all 22 students. It's 18 credits.
Can you explain what endorsed means? I mean, is it a certificate program or
It
So-
is adding an endorsement on their current certificates.
Okay.
So they are certified, they're fully certified bilingual teachers. And then they will be fully certified to teach special education at the level that they're at. So the endorsement is different than a full certification. A special ed teacher that goes for special education can teach from kindergarten to 12th grade. Endorsements are on your original certificate. Most original certificates are preschool,
Right.
early childhood, or they're elementary, or they're secondary.
Okay. Mr. Escobedo.
Yeah, the promissory note, is that just like a goodwill intent, or is that actually binding?
I think Lori wrote it, so.
It is a binding agreement, and it's excusing the repayment obligation over a period of years. So each year that they work, so much is excused, 1/3 would be excused.
Ms. McCullough?
So I hear you saying this is a 2-year program. Is there going to be a rolling, so next year we start another group of students, and the next year, and so that we always have a feeder, or this is just a one-time shot, or what is the
This is a one-time
intent?
program at this point. It isn't a reoccurring program, it's a one-time program. We've done it before, we did it with Rockford College. In that program, there were 15 teachers that went through, and we yielded 6 special ed teachers from that. So, and they currently are still here and still teaching in our district. So, if the need arises again, we would certainly look to do this at another time.
Just a little transfusion.
Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Not, this will come for a vote for the board on our November 8th meeting. And our final 7 items, Mr. Schmidt, save the best for last, right? Okay.
Yes, what we have right now is an intergovernmental agreement with the Winnebago County. Part of the project to build a new school to replace Kishwaukee and Nelson, the city has contributed $600,000, the county $600,000, and then $200,000 from private investors. The county passed their resolution, which you have in front of you tonight, where they'll sit there and they will give us $200,000 for 3 years in 2017, 18, and 19 to help with the land acquisition and the site prep work for the new school at Kishwaukee.
Any questions on that agreement, Mr. Connor?
Just want to say thank you to the Winnebago County Board on this and their commitment to this, what we think is going to be a real foundational effort. And thank you to the administration for the follow-through on this. I would say good job.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Number G, real estate purchase as part of building the new schools. We have a purchase agreement for 706 South 3rd Street. And then the next few are resolutions for eminent domain. We've pretty much need to go to the next step. We'll still continue to negotiate with and work with the landowners, but we're looking at going to the next step with eminent domain for properties that are associated with Kishwaukee Nelson New School.
I guess I would ask the question, is the issue dollars? Is it lack of finding the right people to talk to or get a response from the right people or whatever?
A combination of both, where we've reached out several times to one owner. We haven't heard from them in 2 months. Some of them where we had some complications with the bank, or there's several liens on there to reduce some of the liens. So it's kind of, it's a mixed bag.
Okay. Ms. McCullough?
And are they all residential? Are they?
Yes, these are all residential.
None of these other businesses, I'm reading.
Any other questions or discussion? Not, these will be presented at our November 8th board meeting for a vote. Any other further business for this evening? If not, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Rollins, voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 7:51. Cubs are down 2-0. Yeah.